Hello and welcome to this webinar delivered by the ISM Trust. I'm Maria Visitiu and I'm Member Engagement and Events Officer at the ISM, and I'm delighted that you could join us today for this webinar. Before we begin, I just have a few points for you. You should be able to see us and you should also be able to hear everyone, but we can't see you or hear you. If you experience any technical difficulties, such as sound quality issues, please let us know in the questions box and we'll make attempts to resolve the issues. The webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on the ISM's website at ism.org/webinars. If you think of any questions during the presentation, please let us know in the questions box and we'll attempt to leave some time at the end to answer as many of them as possible. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to Pauline, who will be chairing our session today.
Thank you very much, Maria, and to everybody logged into the webinar. And thanks to all our panellists in the webinar who will be introduced to in a moment. So my name is Pauline Black. I'm a senior lecturer in music education at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. So most of my time is spent working in initial teacher education, and I'm also performance coordinator in the department, which involves coordinating all the instrumental and vocal tutors courses and assessments. I also spend one day per week working on freelance education and community music projects, and I'm currently teaching in music technology in a local secondary school. I spent many years working in a local authority school before moving to work at the university. So during lockdown, music making has continued in a range of forms. However, access across country has varied widely. Moving into the digital space has brought a new set of challenges for many, but also lots of opportunities. And now that schools have returned, teachers continue to modify their practice, reacting to the ever-changing COVID restrictions and also a lack of clarity as to what is actually possible. The ISM have been extremely helpful with their updates throughout this period, being sector leading at collating research, lobbying and providing resources, such as the recent #CanDoMusic campaign, and we'll hear more from one of our panellists later as to more about that. But today in this webinar, we're going to be discussing the sort of measures that have been put in place to tackle COVID-19 to ensure that music making can continue. We have Scotland, England and Northern Ireland represented, so it will be useful to hear perspectives from the different nations, and perhaps if we have any Welsh viewers today, you can add your perspectives into the mix too. I know from discussions amongst Scottish colleagues, both instrumental and classroom teachers, that there are vast differences in what is happening with regard to the amount and type of music making going on in schools and privately, or indeed still online and out of schools. It's not currently a level playing field, but we can reflect on matters of equity and social justice here. Some young people face a far greater impact than others. And we often hear the term postcode lottery when talking about music provision, and it seems even more prevalent at the moment. But music teachers are generally resourceful and creative people and really have been working extremely hard to ensure that music making can still continue. So this webinar is a chance to informally discuss things and share ideas. What is happening in teaching and learning, and what can we learn from one another? Please do add your own ideas in the chat, as Maria said, and if you have questions, please add these too, and we will pick these up later. So I'm very pleased to introduce our panellists this morning. I'm really looking forward to hearing from everyone. I'll hand over to the panellists and you can say a little bit to introduce yourselves. So first of all, I'd like to hand over to Yogesh for a brief introduction.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Pauline, for inviting me. Great to be here. My name is Yogesh Dattani. I run Ealing Music Service, which is a music service in the London Borough of Ealing, Ealing in London. And my expertise is Indian music, which I'm really delighted about. And yes, it's challenging, but we're very determined to get through this period and get back to why we chose this profession, which is to enable lots and lots of young people to embrace the magic of music.
Thanks, Yogesh. And I'd like you to meet our next panellist, and that's Claire.
Hello, everyone. My name is Claire Bowes, and I am the founding director of Omagh Music Academy in Northern Ireland, where we offer primarily one-to-one music tuition to people of all ages and abilities in the local area. Our strapline is encouraging confidence and creativity through music, and that's what we aim to do on a weekly basis through our lessons.
Thank you. And our next panellist, I'd like to hand over to Jodie. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jodie Underhill. I was previously a music and drama teacher for over 18 years. I have a PhD in psychology from Keele University. My research focused on musical culture in different types of schools, and I am now a research associate for the ISM.
Thanks, Jodie. And our final panellist for today, I'd like to introduce Izzy.
Morning, everyone. So I'm Izzy Fixer. I'm actually a business manager at Croydon Music and Arts. So I'm in Croydon. It's a local, London Borough of Croydon, so sort of just within the M25, south of London. And we are a local authority hub as well. So we've got that, and we do small group and individual instrumental lessons and whole class teaching in schools as well. So there's a lot of different things, but I tend to do the back end now.
Thanks very much. So we've got a wealth of experience and kind of different perspectives on our panel. Thank you. So I'm just going to get stuck straight into the questions because we've got lots to discuss this morning. So first question, just for the panel to think about, I'd like to start by asking off what measures you've put in place to tackle COVID-19 so that we can all just enable teaching and learning to continue. And let's put that one to, I think, Claire first.
Okay. So basically in March, with very little notice or warning, like all of us, we had to very quickly think of how we were going to try and adapt our teaching methods to be able to continue tuition as much as possible. So within the space of a few days, we converted everything to online lessons. And from March until June, we continued teaching online. Primarily online. We were all working from home and teaching our students, delivering lessons in the best way possible via internet, which was something totally new to us, but has opened a lot of doors. The interesting thing about it was that then over the summer, a lot of our students actually continued with lessons online, something which they never previously did, but because I suppose we had explored it and been doing it for a few months, they continued with that. And then now we're back in September. So after a lot of that thought and risk assessing and everything, we have reopened the Music Academy. I'm still encouraging students to stay online where possible, but a lot of our students have opted to come back for in-person lessons, and obviously the format's very different in that we have hand sanitizer as soon as they come in. With perspex screens around reception. All of us tutors have face masks that we wear when we're in the building. In each of our teaching rooms, we have more than 2 meters distance, and we also have 2 instruments, so 2 pianos or 2 drum kits or whatever is necessary, so that we can demonstrate on one and the student is on the other. And we also have a large perspex screen in between us, so that we have that extra protection, and windows are kept open to help with ventilation. Lesson times have had to be cut slightly shorter to allow us to sanitize in between students, but thankfully everybody has been very understanding of that, understands that it's something that we need to do.
Thanks, Claire. It's really interesting to hear about the increased engagement almost over the summer, where you said that you had more, more kids continuing with lessons over the summer that you might not normally have had. That was really encouraging to hear.
It was lovely, and it was nice. I suppose it's something that we had never considered teaching via the internet before, and students had never considered it either, but it has hugely benefited them, because now they're obviously just continuing on, so they have progressed further than, there's no recap needed as such when lessons resumed last week.
Yeah, and there's that period normally after the summer when it's after the holidays and it's like, oh, you've got holiday lip or whatever. It's like, oh, actually you can continue. So that's actually a benefit. It's also really nice to hear that sort of investment in resources, which maybe not everybody's going to be able to do, but obviously, you know, in your academy, that's a really kind of healthy thing that you can resource things really well.
Yeah, it was the only way I was thinking of reopening safely.
Yeah, no, really positive things to hear there. Thank you. Can we maybe hear from Izzy? Do you have anything to say on that one?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Claire was saying that, you know, we went very digital very quickly in March because there was no choice. So I don't know if I'm allowed to use like media names or anything, but we went with Zoom because we found it worked best, and we'd actually piloted online lessons in 2019, so we sort of knew what we were doing roughly. Stuck to Zoom, and actually we had some really good take up. Some students dropped off, but that they seem to be coming back now. We're going face to face again. Where we also do whole class, I'm only going to touch on it because I know not everyone goes into schools in that way. That also went online, so we started using Seesaw as a platform of engaging with the students in a different way, and where schools were using like Google Classroom and various other softwares, we'd work with that to give them some resources so they could still have their lessons. And then sort of in May we continued and added Seesaw for our centres and all of the ensembles we were doing, so we could actually get those groups back together, even digitally, just to collaborate and see what else, you know, see what everyone else is doing. And for the first time this summer, we actually did a summer school. It's always been a very reluctant area where we weren't sure about how well it would be received, but actually this summer it was really well received. Parents were really keen to, in some ways, keep the kids entertained for half an hour where they don't have to be watching them like a hawk. And it means that there isn't that, you know, beginning of term, can't remember how to hold the instrument or look after it. So it's gone really well. There's been challenges, but you know, we're back on.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You made a point there. You know, you mentioned, you know, some different platforms, and I know that for some schools it's been easier to access different platforms because of, you know, safeguarding issues or access, that some have been able to use different platforms and not other ones. But you've mentioned there different ways of accessing a range of different platforms to suit the circumstance of the different schools. So you've found ways to crack that one, almost to get in to suit the circumstances of what's, you know, what the school requires. And could you say a little bit more about the summer school and how you managed that? Were they kind of playing collaboratively, or was it virtual classes, or?
It was predominantly the sort of the Zoom lessons as a small group individual lessons. So parents could, we gave everyone the option, you know, if you would like to, if teachers wanted to do it, they could. We didn't force teachers to give up their summer to continue teaching, because we know that actually March to July was probably one of the most difficult periods for all of our teachers, because the mental strain of going online to do all your lessons. So, you know, you're sat watching a screen, watching yourself, you know, up to 8 hours a day, some of them, if not more. So we gave them that option, and parents received it really well and said, "Yep, I still want, you know, little Johnny to have it." I don't know what instrument. So yeah, with the flute lessons over the summer, because otherwise he's going to get bored. There's not the same thing to do. You can't. We can't go on holiday. We can't go to France for 3 weeks and then come back and everything be normal. It's making sure that the kids had something they enjoyed.
Yeah, you make really good point about music being kind of really empowering and a really great thing for you know, kids to keep going, but also a really valid point about health and well-being for the instrumental teachers who are actually delivering these things and being sat at a screen all day. So it's a really good thing that we need to kind of keep under consideration as well. Yogesh, do you have anything to add to this question?
Yes, so the first step that we took was to safeguard the interests of our stakeholders, namely schools, our teachers, and perhaps most importantly, the children and young people. As soon as we could, we furloughed the majority of our instrumental teaching team so that for the summer term, we were able to release schools of the financial burden of lessons for that term. Secondly, as part of a local authority, even before we furloughed staff, we were able to guarantee staff that they would be paid for the teaching that they were committed to deliver during the summer term. And also a small team of staff continued to provide online music support that children could access throughout the summer term and holiday. So particularly at a time of national crisis, these three steps have been key in helping us to maintain positive relationships with all our stakeholders. As colleagues have mentioned, online support, we are now in a position to deliver online lessons using a secure platform. And I think this will be particularly crucial should entire schools or even bubble groups within schools be locked down in the future. So that's, as we can see, that's a real possibility. The other thing is that specialist music coordinators are few and far between. So that very often in schools, there isn't anybody to fight the music corner. And based on this and the DFE guidance, we have uploaded various music-related risk assessments that schools may download and adapt to suit their own circumstances. And the last thing I'd like to mention is the health and well-being of staff. The last few months have been extremely challenging for all of us. And while it's great to have income safeguarded, we recognize early on that it's really important to keep in touch with staff and updated on relevant developments as they unfolded. And many teachers have told me that they have found this to be very reassuring.
Thank you. Yeah, lots of really good points there. And again, touching on health and well-being of staff, which is crucial, as you mentioned, because we really don't know what's around the corner, and future-proofing the service for enabling music making to keep going, which is super important. To keep fighting that music corner is really, really important. But yeah, thank you all for sharing your perspectives. It's really good to hear what's been happening. I think I'm just going to go on to the next question, because we've got lots of questions, lots of things to discuss. One thing it's interesting to hear is in the commonalities and the approaches between the four nations. And I'm going to go to Jodie, because Jodie's the policy person and she's on the money when it comes to what we can and can't do. So I'm going to pass to Jodie just for a little bit of guidance on that. So Jodie, if you could maybe keep us right.
Okay, so in terms of commonality, the easy answer is there is none. The guidance was updated just before schools went back on the 28th of August. So the English guidance is much more detailed now about what is and isn't allowed, and what mitigating measures can be put in place to safeguard staff and pupils. It focuses mostly on social distancing, ventilation and room size, as well as the sort of respiratory and hand hygiene that we're all used to now. In terms of the Scottish guidance, it currently states that wind, brass and singing should be avoided for the initial reopening of schools. We're not quite sure how long that is due to last, but there is an announcement due today on the next phase of reopening in Scotland, so that may change as soon as today. In terms of Wales and Northern Ireland, there is no specific guidance for music teaching. So although there are no specific restrictions, that also means that there's no specific guidance as to how to help teachers progress with their teaching. So it's a little bit confusing across all the nations as to what is happening.
Thanks, Jodie. Yeah, and in Scotland we've been back since August the 11th, so we've had a little bit longer in schools, and I can speak just a little bit on Scotland to say that there, as I mentioned just at the start, I won't go into it in too much detail, but there's a vast kind of differences just in how different authorities are interpreting those kind of guidelines. Obviously, there's no wind, brass and singing anywhere, but just what people can and can't do because of local circumstances. And even just, resources within schools, there may or may not be rooms to go to because schools are using what would have been instrumental rooms. They're now isolation rooms and so on. So local circumstances can vary greatly. Not all authorities are some authorities are teaching face-to-face, for example, string teaching, these things, but not all are. So the as you say, clarity and commonality is not even the same across Scotland. I don't know, Claire, if you want to say a little bit about Northern Ireland.
Yeah, as Jodie said, I mean, we haven't been given any guidance on reopening, but again, we haven't been told not to reopen. So the difficulty there with me was kind of, I just wanted to be sure that I was doing the right thing and doing everything I could to reopen safely. So I actually contacted environmental health within my local council, who provided fantastic support in terms of reassuring me that I was doing everything that I could be doing for the safety of myself, the other tutors, and for all the students coming through our doors. And you know, it has been challenging in that way as well, but the fact that we've had little guidance has made it a little bit more difficult.
Thank you. Yeah, and if I can just talk briefly about, you know, classroom teachers, who I obviously, we all, you know, have an interest in classroom teachers as well, but again, what classroom teachers can and can't do varies so much, again, because of circumstance and the amount of resource that they have and access to things, and we just all await more clarity and have to have patience, I guess. But let's just move on to our next question, and how easy has it been to implement change? And I'll put that one to Yogesh.
So yes, to use a much cliched phrase, necessity is the mother of invention. We've all, as we've just heard, had to put various systems in place from scratch, from enabling families to access online music support, to teachers filming and uploading lessons on the website. For a lot of our teachers, this is not something that they've ever done before. So, however, they've rallied around and they've actually done a fantastic job. So, really, really pleased to see that. I'm just simply astounded by the can-do approach and goodwill of every member of my team, as well as school-based colleagues. I think in summary, the logistics of change have been extremely hard, challenging, and I must say very, very stressful. But on the other side, this process has brought out the very best in human beings in a way that I think is unprecedented. Colleagues have demonstrated resilience and adaptability that has been, I think, quite remarkable.
Thank you. You mentioned there about the use of, you know, filming and all the kind of digital things. Did you find it was kind of difficult to implement a lot of the digital things amongst your staff?
So I think the logistics were extremely challenging. The staff rallied around. I think we're all very used, thanks to the selfie craze. I think we're all very used to having our own phones pointed towards ourselves and taking photographs or video footage. So that was the easy side of it. But the actual, the number of videos and support materials that were coming through, very often 20 per week. And to sort of, initially we had to sort of watch those and quality assure them and actually upload on our website. So that was extremely challenging. And so we were very relieved that once we had furloughed our staff, we had a lot of headspace to start grappling with the future. We continued with providing online support for our whole class ensemble tuition, and for our small group tuition lessons, we provided much more sort of generic support rather than bespoke lessons for each and every child, which is something that we simply couldn't cope with.
That's an interesting approach. Just you mentioned that, you know, the sort of the three-pronged approach, just to furlough staff and just to really concentrate on a kind of a strategic approach. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Izzy, would you like to make a comment on how easy it was to implement change in your organisation?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways I've interpreted the question in a slightly different way, in that where I said earlier we went digital quite quickly because we'd piloted it before. It's now the going back to this new normal, which is seeing even more change. So we've all almost got used to this digital normal, and now we're having to find this hybrid between what we can and can't do, and the rules are changing. You know, as Jodie said earlier, they're changing quite regularly. I mean, in terms of the slightly more boring back end stuff, that the risk assessments and processes involved are having to be adapted almost weekly. And where we're part of a local authority, we have to get ours approved by health and safety consultants. We have to go through public health, and that all then takes time, which I know our staff appreciate, that that patience is needed, but it can be very, very challenging to sort of share that in a constructive way with parents. That doesn't make it sound like we're doing everything last minute.
Mm-hmm. And do you find it's challenging to share that with staff as well as parents? Yeah,
quite often. I mean, I know staff are understanding, but at the same time they see it as a barrier to them getting back out into doing what they love, because they love the face-to-face, they love working with the children. It's not the same on screen.
Yeah.
And almost putting up what is essentially red tape and saying, actually, no, you can't do this until we've got the boxes ticked, is frustrating, because they want to get going, they want to get the kids back in, they want to, I don't know, I'm going to sound like I'm harping on about it, but the well-being of the students is really high in their minds, because, you know, if you're 14, 15, you love your music and you want to go and play with your friends and on your instruments, being stuck at home isn't the same.
Yeah.
You know, and sending a video every week is a bit like, it's great, but like I said, it's still not the same as what they were doing.
Yeah. It's good to kind of hear your perspective though, and maybe help people understand why these things have to be done. And like you say, you just want to get on and do it, but we're in the world that we're in, all these things have to be done. Yeah. Claire, do you want to add anything to this question?
Yeah, I suppose one thing, and I'm sure it was the case for a lot of us, for the 6 months where essentially we had to work from home, a lot of us had family at home with us. So I was trying to, deliver lessons online, provide support to the tutors, deal with parents, and all the daily kind of running of the business, while my husband was also working from home, and our 3 children, who were all primary school age, were also at home with us. So it was definitely quite stressful at times, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. But I mean, the silver lining to it all is now that everything has been implemented, and even trying to get that headspace over the summer to sit and write risk assessments and think of what I needed to think of, and what safety measures we needed to put into place. You know, there was the logistics of doing all that. It was hard to get the space to kind of focus on that. But at this stage, although it's still very, very busy trying to, make sure we're doing everything right, it's slightly rewarding, I suppose, to have come through this far, and hopefully we've come through the worst of it, in terms of, if we do have to revert back to online lessons, we have done that and we know that we can do that. Hopefully the hardest bit is done, but as Izzy said, the risk assessments are constantly having to be reviewed and updated, and you think of something else all the time, and it is constant, but I suppose it's just we had to make it happen.
Yeah, and thank you. And Izzy, you touched on a bit about this, but the next question that I've got here is, how receptive are pupils, parents, and teachers to change? We've all kind of touched on bits of this already, but Yogesh, do you want to kind of lead off on that one?
So yeah, as a nation and a music fraternity, we have all become, I think, extremely tech savvy over the last 6 months, and of course, young people are naturally very comfortable with technology. For example, a group of my pupils learned the various parts of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. They practiced it, rehearsed it, came together and performed it online, all from the comfort of their own homes. In my view, the challenge for the music fraternity, and an opportunity, is to harness this upskilled workforce together with a natural can-do attitude of young people, to provide innovative and exciting opportunities for more and more young people, and perhaps people from diverse backgrounds.
Yeah, thank you. So basically just embracing the challenge, and like you say, people don't even need to move out of their home. And it's interesting you used Somewhere Over the Rainbow, because that was one that the Music Education Partnership Group in Scotland had a big initiative using Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I'm assuming that wasn't connected to the Scottish initiative. That was just fluke.
It was an initiative led by one of my assistant heads, so I need to check up on where he got his inspiration from.
I'm assuming it was to do with the NHS. Probably lots of people across the country picked rainbow as a theme, but yeah, that was a big initiative done in Scotland as well, to get lots of people around the country performing that and uploading videos, and just having a big collaborative effort to share making music and playing that tune or singing that tune across the country, and kind of, you know, just sharing their love of music across the country at whatever age and stage they were.
It was lovely to hear about, and you know, rainbows and blue skies rather than sort of doom and gloom that was sort of were a few weeks ago.
Yeah, definitely. Izzy, is there anything that you want to add to that question?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our staff actually found it really positive going digital, because it meant it's where they'd normally go into schools and just see sort of one student after another, they actually got to meet parents. So, you know, these almost not ethereal, but these figures that they've been emailing potentially for years, they actually are able to put a name and a face together. They actually quite enjoyed it, and it meant parents were getting more engaged than ever. So actually, I mean, I'm not saying all parents do this, but encouraging their students to practice more than they were previously.
Okay.
Well, there were equally on the other side that there were parents who were resistant to change, either in terms of not having the access to technology, or actually having technology able to cope with the demands of having potentially two parents and several children at home, all needing to use Wi-Fi broadband at the same time. And not everyone has the access or the opportunity to have that sort of technology. But we have also found that technology is definitely a good gateway to get to young people and students themselves. Although not every student does have a smartphone, most will have access to that, or a tablet, or some sort of device, which means they can get online, you know, whether they're on Instagram or anything like that. And it just means they can still engage with the things they love, even if they can't leave the home. Actually, one area I did experience actually as a parent was music in early years.
Okay.
So I have a 2-year-old, nearly 3, and we tried to do some, we did do some sing and sign, and actually where she was born, you know, practically with a device in hand, she very quickly got used to the idea that, okay, her teacher was on the screen, but then at the same time there's the attention span there. So it was actually quite interesting seeing the difference in how different organisations were able to cater to their audience. And it meant that I could see some friendly faces that weren't just work colleagues.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's been interesting to see during lockdown, and you know, from March, all the different music organisations and the way that they have just sprung into action and put things on and shared things in the online environment for a whole range of different, you know, ages and stages. You know, you mentioned early years. There's all the different home learning things, and you know, classroom instrumental, early years community music, all sorts of, you know, participatory music, and it's been really great to see, and people who are trying things out, and it's been challenging for some people, but it's been great to see all the wealth of stuff that's out there. It's been great. Claire, have you got anything to add to that question? How do you feel they've been receptive?
Yeah, a lot of them definitely were. One of the things that I find quite nice about it as well, you know, parents were willing to try whatever they could to make it work. pupils were, as I say, delighted to have had the opportunity to continue with their learning because they were missing out on so many other things. And even our tutors were just so willing to do whatever they could to continue delivering lessons. And we got so many positive messages and feedback and thanks from parents, which kind of made it all worthwhile. One of the things that was lovely, and a lot of parents have said this to us, particularly for younger children and parents that weren't necessarily musical, we asked that they sat in with their children to kind of provide a bit of support, even in terms of technology and that. And the parents found that they learnt a lot and they felt more confident to help their children practice between lessons, and that they were understanding more of how we did things, which was a lovely thing about it. Because although we had always said that they could come in and sit in on lessons, very few actually took us up on that. So that was one positive that came out of it. And Izzy, actually, as you were saying about, you know, being able to sit in with your child, I did the same with my daughter. We run a pre-instrumental program. And although I know what happens in the program, and my daughter was going to the classes and I was, you know, did you enjoy it? Yeah, it was good. But I never got to hear exactly what she was doing. And it was lovely that I got to take part with her and sort of see firsthand what was happening and then support her between classes as well, because I knew what she had been learning in the different songs and activities that she had been doing. So yeah, thankfully it was all very positive, the feedback that we received and the support from parents and students and the tutors.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. I guess it's removed a bit of the mystery of the music lesson or session, or the teenager that comes home. What did you do today? Oh no, I did this, kind of murmur. But there's a kind of bit of sharing. And I wonder how the tutors felt about having parents kind of in on the act, or I guess that was a bit of a change for them as well.
Yeah, some of them were a wee bit sort of at the start, a wee bit unsure, but they said they very easily forgot about the fact that they were there. And when they saw the benefits themselves, you know, that the support, that the parents felt in a better place to support the children, they were actually quite happy to continue with the parents being there.
Well, that's really interesting. That's an interesting thing for people to think about, who they maybe felt, oh, I'm being watched, or oh, I feel a bit apprehensive that the parent is here or the guardian is here, that actually it could then benefit their, you know, their progress with that student. Yeah, that's a really interesting thing to think about. Okay, so let's move on to, time is ticking away. Suggestions for any viewers on things that they could do themselves. So for any teachers that are watching, let's go to Jodie, because you can keep us right with all your procedures and things. So give us some hints and tips and point us in the right direction.
So there's lots of guidance on the ISM webpage in terms of instrument hygiene, risk assessments. We also try and summarise any new guidance that comes out as soon as we can, rather than having to delve through all the iterations of the updates, because they're not always clear on the government sites as to which sections have been updated. So we try and keep on top of that. We also published a global literature review in July, which was updated in August. It looks at music performance and music education and COVID-19. So the section on music education explores quite a lot of the studies worldwide onto transmission and children. And so if people are interested in sort of reading some of those scientific studies, they're up to date as of the 21st of August. But I also covered in that guidance initially, while we were still waiting for the English guidance to be updated, there were 32 separate pieces of guidance from 10 different countries. So it's quite interesting to see what other countries have been doing. The US and Canada were particularly sort of on the ball, I think, because of the nature of their sort of instrumental and vocal programs. And the one that particularly stood out to me that people might be interested in is the one from British Columbia, which you can find in the Global Literature Review, which isn't just a document on sort of suggestions and guidelines for teaching safely, but there's quite a large section on advocating for music education and why it's so important that it continues. but there's also quite a lot in there about instrument hygiene, curriculum models, but also staff health and well-being, which I know we've touched on briefly. So people might find that interesting just to see what other countries around the world are doing, as well as our own guidance that's out there.
Thanks, Jodie. So for viewers who are maybe worried about going back into schools or returning to teaching, they're maybe still teaching online, they're obviously worried about teaching online, maybe they're slightly more comfortable with that now, but they're maybe worried about going back into school, they're maybe worried, you know, Claire, you gave us really good examples of, you know, how you've got things set up, but they're maybe worried about the layout, or maybe the teaching space is not going to be of the correct dimensions and size and ventilation and everything. That's a really good place to start, is the literature review that Jodie has pointed us to. But have people got kind of suggestions that they can point viewers to for things that people can do just when they're thinking about going back into teaching, if maybe people are a bit apprehensive about teaching face-to-face for the first time for ages? Who would like to follow on? Claire, do you maybe want to pick up on anything on that one?
Yeah, I find the ISM risk assessment very, very useful in that as well, because that was, no, I didn't enjoy doing it. I find it actually quite stressful. And there were several times where I thought, is it worth it? Should I just stay online? More because it made me think of everything. But on the other side of that now, because I did think of everything and plan everything as best as I could, I'm really glad that we've done what we've done. You know, so although it's not an easy process trying to make that move to get back in person, but it's lovely, you know, even though we've got 2 instruments, it's lovely to sit and improvise with a student or play a duet, although we're on different pianos. It's still lovely to be able to do that, which is something that we weren't able to do online. So it's not an easy process to get back to in person, but it's very worthwhile, and stick with it, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's really nice to hear. And I'm, as I said, I'm in school just briefly once a week, and it's great being in with the kids. You know, the kids are wearing their face masks in the corridors, and it's just really nice being back interacting with kids after all this time. I was working online with them before the summer, and it was really difficult. It was really difficult trying to engage online. Face-to-face is just great being back with them. So, and I was quite apprehensive about doing that, but now I'm back. It's brilliant. Izzy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm going to do the W word. I'm going to go well-being again. If people are really nervous about going back to school, that they need to speak to either colleagues that have or friends that actually teach in schools regularly, and equally with those with health conditions that can be affected. Actually, don't be afraid to ask schools or wherever you're teaching to say that I'm not comfortable doing it this way. Can we try it this way? You know, I've had a look at the ISM risk assessments, for example, and I want to take a couple of facets of this and implement them. So whether it's using, you know, having screens, using visors, face masks or face coverings. Another thing we found for wind and brass are moisture guards, because there's been a lot of scientific research about the use of them, and I mean, without sounding a bit grim, the various droplets and risk of infection. So that is an avenue if you're a wind or brass player, and it's just taking it slowly and not feel forced. So it sounds like a mental health session this now, sorry.
Thank you. But yeah, no, the health and well-being is really important for the children, for the kids, for your pupils, as well as the teachers, because everybody's just getting used to, you know, used to being back to I don't want to use the phrase the new normal because we hear it so many times, but for everybody it's really, really important. Yogesh, what would you like to add to this one?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what we've heard already from all 3 colleagues. I think the biggest barrier to creativity and productivity is fear, and I think that sense of isolation. Fear because of the current situation, In terms of isolation, well, in our business, if you're a music coordinator in a primary school, if the school is lucky to have you as a music specialist, it's highly likely that you're the only person in the school that teaches the subject. So isolation is something that we've had to deal with forever. My suggestion would be to get advice and support, which is what we've heard already. That you can get the support from a number of various sources, music organizations, such as the ISM. You should certainly work closely with your music education hub. They are grappling and have grappled with all the issues that we have discussed. They've got risk assessments, as we have on our website, which you can download and adapt to your own school. And the other thing I would suggest for school teachers is to join networks, because for that sense of support. And if there isn't a network in your area, well, why don't you be the one that suggests establishing one?
Yeah, no, really good points, thank you. And in Scotland, we've got the Scottish Association for Music Education, SAME, as well, which is a really good point of contact as well. But so much useful information from the ISM itself. I think this is a good time to see if Maria is lurking backstage, to see if we've actually got any questions or any comments in the chat that we can respond to. On cue, here is Maria. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you all for the lovely discussion. It's been really interesting. Lots of things to learn from you all. We do have a couple of questions. If anyone watching, if you want to write some more questions in the questions box, please do. I'll just go through the ones that we've received so far. So the first one is kind of aimed at the whole panel. Is someone asking for advice for whole class teachings, for whole class instrumental teaching, especially for wind and brass instruments? Have you kind of had to deal with that, or have you found any solutions, splitting the class in two, that kind of thing, or anything like that?
Okay, Yogesh, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to come in, and I sort of just want to sort of focus on that sort of sense of fear. I think that there is a lot of irrational fear of the risk, and something that I've grappled with, which applies to wind and brass, but perhaps is more pertinent to for example, African drums. Where certainly in Ealing, we have provided a class set of instruments, regardless of the number of classes involved in whole class ensemble tuition. So in addition to the sort of wind and brass specific issues, our issue with this particular instrument is that there was only one class set. And when we took advice from that, we found that actually something that we all know is that the virus cannot survive for more than 72 hours. And therefore, the other thing, if you put in place, is getting every child to sanitize their hands at the beginning of the lesson and at the end of the lesson. And that in that way, there is absolutely no or minimal chance of virus transfer between child to child, even if you are teaching consecutive classes in that same school. And for the peace of mind of head teachers, what we will be doing is numbering each instrument and which will be accessed and played by the same set of children each week. Although after 72 hours, the virus cannot survive, so there's no real risk. And in terms of woodwind and brass, the DFE guidance has made it very clear that there is no risk. There is no increased risk from playing woodwind and brass instruments over and above talking in the same space. But where there are a large number of pupils, that's something that perhaps we need to be a little bit cautious about and keep the social distancing measures in place.
I think if I can come in on the wind and brass particularly, it's more to do with the cumulative aerosol. So the guidance is still for social distancing between players, preferably back to back or side to side. It will come down, I think, for those whole class groups to using as large a space as possible. So they might have to rejig which room they're teaching in with the adequate ventilation and those sorts of things. There is guidance in the DFE music guidance, particularly about instruments and hand hygiene and handling them, but they might also want to consider how they deal with spit valves and things like that if they're teaching brass instruments. And there is the guidance from some of the countries around the world about different ways that can be mitigated.
Can I jump in as well?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, just sort of mirroring what Yogesh and Jodie have just said about sanitising. And to be honest, we have had some schools say actually we're not comfortable having wind and brass in this term. Can we go with a string? But for the wind and brass particularly, we are looking at side to side, back to back, additional space, additional more than 2 meters apart, making sure rooms are really well ventilated and actually have a period between sessions where the room can be aired. So whether it's sort of 15 minutes just to try and disperse some of those particles. I know nothing is foolproof. And also splitting whole classes. So where a class is potentially 30 students, dropping it to 15 and doing it in 2 with that 15-minute break in between. Yeah, the split valves and clean up there is necessary to sort of address, and moisture guards seem to be reassuring some as to addressing it, but obviously nothing is concrete.
Mm-hmm.
I did hear of one college that was had thought about getting students to get a Tupperware box to collect their spit. It seems a bit gross. But there you go. Wouldn't do that with small children.
Suggestion of towels so far.
Yeah.
Involve puppy pads as well, but I think whatever method people use, it's important that the person playing the instrument disposes of the waste.
Yeah. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get back to wind and brass in Scotland sometime soon.
That's good. I mean, so far we've received some other questions, but I think we've been so good at managing to actually answer all of them throughout this discussion. So if there's anything else that you feel like the panel hasn't covered, please let us know in the questions box. We'll leave a couple of seconds to see if there's anyone sending anything else. I think there was another question for Claire. It's someone asking if, in terms of PPE, if you're using face masks for singing wind and brass.
Our tutors are all using face masks. We don't really teach wind and brass much because the Education Authority does a lot of that, so there's very little and sort of demand for it. What most of our students that do woodwind have decided to do is remain online. So that has meant that we've eliminated that risk. In terms of the singing, the rooms are, there's a good maybe 5-6 meters between the tutor and the student. And what I've recommended them to do is, if the tutor wants to keep on their face mask, they can. They need to check with the student if they're happy for them to remove it. But they're not, even though they have a screen between them and they're keeping their distance, they don't face each other when they're singing, and the windows are kept open for ventilation.
Perfect, thank you. Seems we're not receiving any more questions, so just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you all for accepting to be on this panel, and thank everyone attending for being with us today, and we hope to see you at another ISM webinar soon. If you have any questions after this, you can send them to our email address, which is membership@ism.org, and we can then direct it to the panel for further responses. Thank you very much. Hope you have a nice day.